Hey guys, haven't seen you in a while, or maybe I am seeing you right now. I'm recording this on the 8th of April, so maybe we're all on class and we're together again. But if not, I hope you're doing well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start something called a novel study. Now we're still going to be reading Newsy LA and getting some information about this time period of this book on Newsy LA, and we're going to still read those articles and take those quizzes. But what we're going to do also is we're going to be reading some of this book that I picked up, which I think you'll love. It's called Call of the Wild by Jack London. One of my favorites. I just saw the movie. Absolutely spectacular. It's about this dog who is domesticated, lives in a nice house with a great master, and eventually some bad things happen, and he has to go north to this really savage part of our country at this time, where they are mining gold. So Buck realizes there are some things that he needs to change about himself, and he adapts, and he eventually becomes less wild. It's a fabulous story about dogs, but it's also about humans and some other things. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So the way this works is I'm going to give you 3 parts for each chapter, because I can't record videos too long. It bounces me out. So 3 parts to each chapter. Listen to these, then read the PDF I have in this assignment, and then take the quiz, which you have to go back out of, and then go to the folder for today and take the quiz afterwards, and don't forget to submit it. All right, so here's the first part of Chapter 1 for Call of the Wild. You're going to love it. Chapter 1, Into the Primitive. Old longings, nomadic leap, chafing at custom's chain, again from its Brummel sleep weakens the Farron strain. Buck did not read the newspapers, or he would have known that trouble was brewing, not alone for himself, but for every Tidewater dog, strong of muscle and with warm, long hair from Puget Sound to San Diego, because men, groping in the Arctic darkness, had found a yellow metal. And because steamship and transportation companies were booming to the find, thousands of men were rushing into the Northland. These men wanted dogs, and the dogs they wanted were heavy dogs with strong muscles by which to toil and furry coats to protect them from the frost. Buck lived at a big house in the sun-kissed Santa Clara Valley. Judge Miller's place, it was called. It stood back from the road, half hidden among the trees, through which glimpses could be caught of the wide, cool veranda that ran around its 4 sides. The house was approached by graveled driveways which wound about through the wide-spreading lawns and under the interlacing boughs of tall poplars. At the rear, things were on even more spacious scale than at the front. There were great stables where a dozen grooms and boys held forth, rows of vine-clad servants' cottages, an endless and orderly array of outhouses, long grape arbors, green pastures, orchards, and berry patches. Then there was the pumping plant for the artesian well and the big cement tank where Judge Miller's boys took their morning plunge and kept cool in the hot afternoon. And over this great domain, Buck ruled. Here he was born, and here he had lived the 4 years of his life. It was true, there were other dogs. There could not be but other dogs on so vast a place, but they did not count. They came and went, resided in the populous kennels, or lived obscurely in the recesses of the house after the fashion of Toots, the Japanese pug, or Yasable, the Mexican hairless, strange creatures that rarely put nose out of doors or set foot to the ground. On the other hand, there were the fox terriers, a score of them at least, who yelped in fearful promises at Toots and Yasable, looking out of the windows at them and protected by a legion of housemaids armed with brooms and mops. But Buck was neither house dog nor kennel dog. The whole realm was his. He plunged into the swimming tank or went hunting with the judge's sons. He escorted Molly and Alice, the judge's daughters, on long twilight or early morning rambles, on wintry nights as he lay at the judge's feet before the roaring library fire. He carried the judge's grandsons on his back, or rolled them in the grass and guarded their footsteps through the wild adventures down to the fountain in the stable yard and even beyond, where the paddocks were, and the berry patches. Among the terriers he stalked imperiously, and Toots and Yasable he utterly ignored, for he was king, king over all creeping, crawling, flying things of Judge Miller's place, humans included. His father, Elmo, a huge St. Bernard, had been the judge's inseparable companion, and Buck bid fair to follow in the way of his father. He was not so large. He weighed only 140 pounds, for his mother, Shep, had been a Scottish shepherd dog, nevertheless 140 pounds, to which was added the dignity that comes of good living and universal respect, enabled him to carry himself in right royal fashion. During the 4 years since his puppyhood, He had lived the life of a sated aristocrat. He had a fine pride in himself, was ever a trifle egotistical, as country gentlemen sometimes become because of their insular situation, but he had saved himself by not becoming a mere pampered house dog. Hunting and kindred outdoor delights had kept down the fat and hardened his muscles, and to him, as to the cold tubbing races, the love of water had been a tonic and a healthy preserver. And this was the manner of dog Buck was in the fall of 1897, when the Klondike strike dragged men from all the world into the frozen north. But Buck did not read the newspapers, and he did not know that Manuel, one of the gardener's helpers, was an undesirable acquaintance. Manuel had one besetting sin. He loved to play Chinese lottery. Also, in his gambling, he had one besetting weakness, faith in a system, and this made his damnation certain, for to play a system requires money, while the wages of a gardener's helper do not lap over the needs of a wife and numerous progeny. The judge was at a meeting of the Raisin Growers Association, and the boys were busy organizing an athletic club. On the memorable night of Manuel's treachery, no one saw him and Buck go off through the orchard on what Buck imagined was merely a stroll, and with the exception of a solitary man, no one saw them arrive at the little flag station known as College Park. This man talked with Manuel, and money chinked between them. "You might wrap up the goods before you deliver 'em," the stranger said gruffly, and Manuel doubled a piece of stout rope around Buck's neck under the collar. "Twist it, and you'll choke 'em plenty," said Manuel, and the stranger grunted, a ready affirmative. Buck had accepted the rope with quiet dignity. To be sure, it was an unwanted performance, but he had learned to trust in men he knew, and to give them credit for wisdom that outreached his own. But when the ends of the rope were placed in the stranger's hands, he growled menacingly. He had merely intimated his displeasure, in his pride believing that to intimate was to command, but to his surprise the rope tightened around his neck, shutting off his breath. In quick rage, he sprang at the man, who met him halfway, grappled him close by the throat, and with a deft twist threw him over on his back. Then the rope tightened mercilessly while Buck struggled in a fury, his tongue lolling out of his mouth and his great chest panting futilely. Never in all his life had he been so vilely treated, and never in all his life had he been so angry. But his strength ebbed, his eyes glazed, and he knew nothing when the train was flagged and the two men threw him into the baggage car. The next he knew, he was dimly aware that his tongue was hurting and that he was being jolted along in some kind of conveyance. The hoarse shriek of a locomotive whistling a crossing told him where he was. He had traveled too often with the judge not to know the sensation of riding in a baggage car. He opened his eyes, and into them came the unbridled anger of a kidnapped king. The man sprang for his throat, but Buck was too quick for him. His jaws closed on the hand, nor did they relax till his senses were choked out of him once more. Okay, that concludes part 1 of chapter 1 for the book Call of the Wild. I hope you enjoyed our introduction to Buck. He is going to go through a lot more adventures before we're finished with this one. Okay, tune in for chapter 1, part 2, which is also in this assignment. Take a look at that, listen to it, and I'll see you soon, hopefully.